Hello, welcome to the latest in the Earn, Learn, Thrive LinkedIn Lives. And today I'm talking to Kath Bilsborough and John Hughes of writingeltmaterials.com. We're going to be talking about the program that they have jointly developed to help ELT professionals develop their material writing skills, whether that's from scratch or improving upon the skills they already have. So just to start off with, I think probably they don't need much of an introduction, but I am going to ask them to just give a little introduction to who they are and what their background is. So Kath, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having us. So I'm Kath Bilsborough, and I suppose first and foremost, I'm an English teacher, and I've been teaching English for 30 plus years since 1987. And then I moved into teacher training, and then I became an ELT author. And the latest venture with John is combining the teacher training with the author experience to provide training for teachers who want to write materials in a nutshell.
That's a great nutshell. And John?
I've been teaching about 30 years. I started as a business English teacher, and there wasn't that much written in the way of course books when I started, which was probably a good thing for me because it made me write materials, and I really liked writing materials, so I've continued ever since. And then I got involved in teacher training along the way as well, so the combination of teacher training and materials writing kind of makes sense for me.
Now that's great. So if you're watching us live, please do say hi in the comments so that we know we're not just having a chat between ourselves. And if you have any questions for John or Kath along the way, please feel free to post those as well. And if you're watching later on replay, do also add any questions or comments you have, because we can come back and have a look at them later. So let's start off by telling everyone a little bit of background to the course that you've been offering. Why you think it's needed, what it aims to do, why you decided to do it together, that kind of thing. So John, would you like to tell us a little bit about how it came about?
Well, I suppose both Kath and I arrived at a similar kind of point in that we've been doing quite a lot of materials writing. We'd also been asked to train teachers along the way. So I know Kath had done some work for the British Council and so on, and I'd worked for Oxford University. So we helped train teachers kind of on our own. And in fact, it's slightly odd because I think I've met Kath once at a dinner in Spain once, and that's the only time we've ever actually met face to face. And it just shows the power. It's a positive thing from social media, is that we've kind of been in touch via social media and created this sort of partnership company online, basically. But we were both at the same stage, I guess, in our careers, and we both needed a partner to kind of give each other a kick and get on with it and just think, well, we can actually just run this ourselves and also be kind of more agile, respond to needs, which is kind of how it got going. But also that we wanted to respond to that need that teachers very rarely get any training in how to write materials, and yet it represents such a huge part of what teaching is about. Teachers write materials every day, but nobody ever trains them to do it. And there are certain basic technical principles they can learn. And we wanted to provide that. But obviously, we're also appealing to other types of teachers with more experience. Kath, you can take over.
Yeah. So Kath, you're quite, maybe this is overstating it slightly, but you once said, semi-famously at least, that all teachers are materials writers. And
yes, yeah, I firmly believe that. When people ask me, when did you start writing materials? And when I stop and think about it, it was the moment I started teaching. And it was through necessity at that time, because I was teaching all kinds of different classes, different levels, and I couldn't afford to buy materials for all those different types of classes. And also, there wasn't a great deal out there. So, and it just got me thinking, and I'm a firm believer that all teachers create. It might be a worksheet, it might be a game, it might be a test or something. But yeah, everybody's doing it to more or lesser extent. And I think these days too, just to mention quickly, I think these days, because there's such a lot of interest in things like diversity and inclusion, etc., a lot of teachers are creating their own materials as they're waiting for publishers to kind of catch up and put the things that they want into the course books. I think that's caused a mini boom in writing as well.
So what kind of people would you say tend to go on your course? I'll ask you, Kath, that, because you just kind of started that conversation.
Okay, that's a really good question, because when John and I set up the first course, we kind of assumed that everybody who would be interested in coming on it would be teachers, English teachers, and some of whom might be interested in moving into materials writing as a career, and some of whom might be just interested in writing materials for their own students and their own context. And what we found actually was that those two types of people did come along, but we also got a much wider range of people. So we got teacher trainers, we got language teachers. We've had one of our participants actually creates material for her German classes. So she took she did the course and kind of switched it all into German afterwards. Obviously, she had to do it in English for us. And this time we've got a French, a woman who's creating French materials. So it's spread out to language teachers. Then we've got people who've got very niche teaching context. So they might have a very, very, if you're teaching, one of our students teaches landscape gardeners how to write material, how to speak English rather. So obviously there aren't any materials out there specifically for her. So she came along to learn how to create her own. And then we've had editors who want to move into writing. We've had writers, quite experienced writers. We've had a real range. People who want to create work in exams, etc. I don't know if I've missed any out there, but basically anybody who is using materials in their work might have an interest in learning how to develop the skills to create them and make them better, and to make them as good as they can be, etc.
No, I mean, that's fascinating, really, hearing, because it doesn't surprise me, because clearly there's going to be a very wide range of applications. But it's great that you're kind of getting out into all those niches, because as you say, there really isn't that much out there, certainly in terms of, training, as opposed to maybe a how-to book, or which, definitely has its place. But actual sort of hands-on training, there really isn't that much out there for people. So, John, can you just tell us a little bit about how the course actually works? Because I've said it's hands-on. Tell us a bit more about, how it works.
We have 10 sessions using Zoom. They're 90 minutes per session. It's a combination of input from us. And you could say, well, why don't you just video record the input and deliver it that way, sort of asynchronously. But we like the kind of synchronous contacts. We use the breakout room quite a lot. And actually the feedback on the courses we've run so far is always, we really like the breakout rooms. Can we have more time for discussion? And we try to add that into the course, but it's actually, it's always a kind of time pressure to cover everything. But I think what people like is that they're all coming from different backgrounds, and that kind of sharing you get, because there's teachers from all over the world with different levels of experience and different backgrounds. So that's a really rich part of the course. So that's important. I mean, the first 5 sessions are mainly on technical skills. They are things that are generic to all materials writing: how to write decent instructions, how to write a basic exercise, how to write good questions, how to create speaking activities. These are all sort of basic principle stuff. how to write decent teacher's notes. And then at the end of the 5 weeks, we ask them to write an assignment. And there's quite a tight brief for the assignment. It's basically a worksheet with teacher's notes. They send it in, and then we give individualized feedback. And we give the feedback in the way that an editor might. We insert comments, but we also write kind of a summary overview in the feedback. It'll depend a little bit on the material, how we respond to it. That first bit is very much based on pinning certain skills down. The second half is more kind of creative. We look at the use of video, of images. We're introducing more of a digital side on this current course. But we also get people on the course who do plan or have an interest in publishing, self-publishing, maybe publishing an article in a journal, or getting involved in writing for publishers. And so we do include that on the course in the final sort of sessions, if we do a kind of a session on how do you get into publishing, because there's a large number of teachers who are just genuinely interested in making that step, you know, at some point. So we cover that as well. And then at the end, their second assignment, they have a much more free choice. They can choose something that relates specifically to their context. So it might be creating their own video content, or it might be creating some online material. They can produce something that's relevant to their context, and then we give them feedback on that as well.
Oh, so I mean, that's absolute gold, you know, because obviously I spent many years writing materials for publishers as well. And it was very much a case of, I was lucky enough to be able to learn on the job, and I had good editors. But, you know, where do you start when you start from scratch? I mean, if people are thinking, and I know lots of people are thinking about this, like either self-publishing or starting to work for publishers, what would be like your top tip, apart from doing your course, obviously, in terms of what they should do in order to progress that?
I would say that my top tip would be that you need to get seen. You need to get your materials seen, you know, and you can't just go along and think, oh, that, you know, this, no matter how good what you've created is, unless the publishers know you and have seen you and trust you, they're not going to really listen to you. So there's lots of ways you can do that. Of course, you can share things on social media, you can have a blog, you can give a talk at a conference, you can give a webinar, you can make yourself you can become known for a certain niche, if you like. So over the past year or so, or couple of years, I think it's become clear who are the people who are really interested in certain things. I don't know, sustainability or whatever. And when you start getting a name for yourself, you know, linked to this kind of thing, you're no longer a mystery person. And then you can approach publishers and also hang out with other writers, because we're much more LinkedIn these days, not only on LinkedIn but in groups, etc., so that we talk to each other, we share information, opportunities, etc. But yeah, the number one thing is to make sure that other people see your materials, share them with your colleagues, get feedback, pilot things, you know. Just there are lots of things that you can be doing at the same time, you know, that would be where I would start. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kath. Yeah, I mean, I think getting other people to use your materials would definitely be a top tip I would give, because it's only when other people try and use them that you sometimes see the holes that there are in them.
I think that's what our course stresses, really, and it's the sort of step that most people are trying to, they perhaps haven't framed it that way, but they've written materials that I can write materials and they can work for my own lesson. But if I gave them to another teacher, they wouldn't necessarily know what I wanted to do with them. So the course prepares you to create content that other people can use. And I think our course is slightly different from if you did a sort of materials development course on an MA program, it would be much more theoretical, looking at methodologies. So our course is very, it's very of the, what I would say, of the real world, you know, and the real world of, if you really want to make money from writing and so on, you need to write to deadlines, you need to write to someone else's brief, you need to have a level of professionalism, the way you approach everything. And hopefully that partly comes through in the course in the kinds of demands that we make. You know, we want assignments by certain dates in a certain way. And that, for many teachers, that's a big step to make, because it's a very different way of approaching materials writing. But if you, and it's not for everybody, and I don't, you know, not all teachers necessarily want to do that, and that's absolutely fine. But I think a lot of people that come on our course are kind of interested in that kind of discipline and learning about that kind of information. So things like, you know, professionalism, approaching, understanding how publishing really works, and that, you know, the big word for me is compromise. You may have, if you have kind of a specific agenda as a teacher and you think, I want to push this way, then maybe trying to publish your materials with a publisher isn't the way to go, because publishers also have their own agenda. So we approach materials writing in a very kind of practical way in that sense.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a big shift, I think, as you say, from your classroom, your students, your materials, to something that actually can be used much more widely. And I agree, you know, the sort of approach to it does need to be quite workmanlike, and I think people don't always get that. You know, they think they're going to come up with a brilliant idea and the publishers will go, oh, yes, we'll publish that, and that isn't kind of how it works.
Yeah, I think with the course design, we try to balance those technical skills with that, when can I add the little bits of wow factor and the creativity, and they kind of have to work side by side to some extent. And I mean, yeah, that's quite challenging. It's also, in terms of teacher development, it's incredibly interesting to try and write materials in a different way for other people, because it challenges your own beliefs about what is the best way to write material or the best way to teach something. You know, you have to think, put yourself in other people's shoes and think, actually, there is always more than one way. I think that's a really interesting sort of developmental area that comes out of it as well.
And you mentioned at the beginning, you know, both of you also have a teacher training background, and, you know, personally, I think that's a really useful thing to have as a materials writer, because it means that you've seen lots of teachers doing things in different ways in different classrooms. You know, what else do you think are those kind of either experience or personality things that can make for a good writer?
I think it depends on the context very much, because, for example, John's background is business English, and he writes general English course for adult market, etc. And my background is more young learners, more primary based, and amongst other things. So it would depend on on your experience. So, for example, for young learner materials, it's really important to have an understanding of child development, if you like, and, you know, what they can do at different ages. And this is something that, you know, you can't just write some materials for second grade of primary and think that they could also work for fourth grade or whatever, because even if the levels are the same,
levels of English,
levels of English rather, their cognitive abilities are going to be completely different. So you have to you know a little bit about that. I think that sometimes there are surprising things that you might bring to your own you know, when you create materials, if somebody's really good at, for example, you know, photography, for example. I mean, I'm just going off on one a little bit now, but if you're able to bring in your own images and use them and this kind of thing, that's another great thing to have. Yeah. I often say to people who are writing materials, work with somebody else, get a buddy, when you start out, because you'll have different skills. You can help each other. Somebody might really be clued up on technical things, design, etc. At the moment, on one of my writing projects, we're actually being asked to write into spreadsheets.
Mm.
Oh, it's just horrible. If anybody on that, if my project manager's listening, sorry, but it's just like, it's horrible. So things like managing technology or different kinds of digital tools, etc. All of these are really valuable skills, and we all know how to do what we know how to do, don't we? But until we learn how to do something else, sometimes we're not even aware of what we might need to do. So
it's a kind of growth mindset, isn't it? Which I guess is important for all educators, whether teachers or trainers or writers, that kind of being willing to try new things and learn, I guess. So John, what have you, moving smoothly across, what have you learned from setting up and running this course?
Well, we're still sort of learning. I mean, I've had my own business for a long time, but it's just been me. So working with somebody else, actually, it's been surprisingly seamless, really. I mean, me and Kath, we haven't come to blows over anything yet. We're very good, I think, at when one of us is feeling less motivated in the week, the other one jumps in and sort of takes over. And we have different things that we enjoy doing about working as a partnership. So there's all that business side of it, which has been quite an interesting thing. I think it helps that we'll probably run 2 courses a year. We'll maybe add on some extra webinars next year. So it's not the only thing we do, because we both are still writing and we have commitments to, publishers. We have the other job kind of thing. So it's not like, we completely rely on it. So there's not that pressure that you might have if you were running a business. But that side of, working like this, it's really been an interesting putting it together. In terms of what I learned about materials writing, you were talking about growth mindset. The amazing thing about this course is, on every course, there's people who come along with an idea for a piece of material, or I look at something in a piece of material, and I think, God, that is a brilliant idea. I wish I'd thought of it. And I'm really struck by just things that come up. And clearly with sort of online materials, digital materials, we're all playing catch up all the time. The latest stuff is, how do we integrate ChatGPT? What is the role of that? How do we regard? I mean, we're all dealing with that. That's new. And those issues inevitably come up on the course. So in a way, obviously as trainers, I mean, we benefit from the participants who bring these ideas with them. And me and Kath, hey, we're not retirement age yet, but we're older. And so you need those sort of younger people coming through and say, yeah, haven't you seen what this does, kind of thing. And that's great for us to be exposed to that all the time. Yeah.
Brilliant. If you're watching live, by the way, do feel free to add any questions, because we've still got a few minutes left, or any comments. I've just noticed Annie saying, I wish I had had the chance to do a course like this when I started. I was lucky to have very good editors. And she said, particularly her first editor, Fiona Mackenzie. So there's a shout out for you, Fiona. So Kath, what about you? What's your experience been then of setting up and running the course? What do you enjoy most about it, perhaps?
One of the things I enjoy most is actually doing feedback on the assignments, even though very often it comes at a time when I'm quite busy. But it's really rewarding to see an assignment where the participant has taken on board, or they're putting into practice some things that have come up in the 5 weeks, etc. And usually, it's some amazing pieces of materials, some really excellent materials, and I really enjoy also being able to give them feedback to make those materials better, because I feel that I'm giving them something that is priceless. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I mean, if I had had somebody giving me feedback on my early materials when I started teaching, and even later materials, to be honest. If somebody had been able to come along and say, actually, Kath, you're cramming too much into that page, or, you haven't really got a really good sequence there because you've missed out this or whatever, that would have been such, it would have probably pushed me on my journey a little bit quicker. I would have got better quicker. Because there was nobody to tell me, obviously. So that's one of my favorite things, and just observing the interaction between students. This week or last Friday, when I did a session, participants were sharing ideas about how they'd use a particular piece of content, and it was just so brilliant to see the differences, because again, they come from, we got people in Mexico, we got people in France, we got people in Uzbekistan, so that everyone has got a very, very unique take on things, and their experience, their context. That for me is a real joy, because especially since I'm working from home, I'm not in a staff room anymore these days. So mixing with teachers, hearing their experiences, even some of the non non-materials related things. You hearing about a writer from a particular country, or a recipe, even the chit chat. That's really yeah, it's lovely. It's nice seeing people bonding, if you like, and becoming friends. And you wonder, what's going to happen next, because sometimes people might get together and do something together, and to feel that we've played a small part in that is really nice.
I think this is one of the really exciting things actually that's been happening over the last few years, particularly since COVID, really, when everybody went online much more, is this ability for people to get together from different places, and it's leading to all sorts of exciting projects happening, which is brilliant to see. So I
just remembered one tiny thing as well that I love doing, and I think John does too, and that's writing our blog posts on our A to Z blog, because it's the one time when we can write whatever we like. We've got nobody breathing down our neck, we've got no deadline, and we suddenly have an idea for a blog post, and we can just write it, and we usually show it to each other, and so you can have a quick look at this and comment. But that's really enjoyable, actually, to be able to write a short blog post about something we know a little bit about, or are interested in, without any constraints.
No, absolutely. So, John, do you have any hints about what you're going to be doing next year?
We will be we finished this course in December that we're currently doing, and then next year we're both kind of busy with writing projects in the spring, so we won't be running a course. We are trying, normally we run the course over sort of 10 or 12 weeks. Next year we're going to run a more intensive one in June, because we've had some people contact us and say, can we do it more intensively? So what would normally be 10 separate sessions will be sort of 5 blocks of 2, all run within the month of June. And we think that will suit certain types of teachers who want to do it perhaps they're at the end of their academic year, or they just want to sort of focus on it quite intensively for the month. So we'll do that. Then we'll run the course. We normally do it in sort of September through to, actually it's from next year, October. So there'll be courses in June and October next year, but we do want to try sort of running a few one-off webinars in the first 6 months of next year, because there are certain areas that people contact us about. So like areas like how do I write materials for teacher training? What if I want to specialise in EAP, English for Academic Purposes, or Business English? And on our course, there isn't necessarily time to cover all of that unless somebody comes onto it, and then we can address it specifically when we give them feedback. So we're interested in that kind of webinar. But to be honest, there's a lot of people out there also doing other things, like Lottie Gelpen's doing diversity very well. And we wouldn't necessarily go into that. We would refer people to the kind of work that she's doing, because obviously our network is such that we know people doing other specialist areas. So we'll continue to be a sort of a kind of a connector in that sense. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So a couple of last minute questions. So Rory says, do you deal with the whole issue of generative AI and materials writing? I'm sure a lot of people are tempted to use it, and this must raise a lot of issues. Just a small question for the last minute. Yeah,
that's quite a big one, Rory. It's obviously coming up. We have opinions on it. There's a whole copyright issue going through the American courts at the moment because our published content has been scraped for data by organizations like ChatGPT. So there's a whole copyright issue kicking off. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. But we certainly look at it in terms of ideas generation, and what AI, what ChatGPT, not so much AI, but what things like ChatGPT, what they will do in terms of speeding up as time savers. And I think we recognise that. So the debate's still going on, isn't it? Yeah, the other question about test writing from Catherine. We do include some work on assessment writing questions, but it's not a major part of the course. A lot of people come, they're already writing tests and so on. But that I agree, it's an interesting area. It might be one of the webinars we might do possibly.
Brilliant. And you've got a couple of people saying if you're doing something on teacher training materials, they're in. So follow those up.
You know about that one, Annie. Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go on, Kath.
No, I was thinking that we're in the process of kind of talking about what might work well as a webinar or a masterclass or whatever. And I think teacher training is definitely going to be one. And also maybe AI, but we need to we're doing our homework with AI, because this is another thing that we like about this, I think, John and myself, is pushing us to keep up with things, to read up, go to attend webinars and do some research ourselves so that we're able to transmit the knowledge that we get. But also we do reach out and we are planning to work with other people. You know, if we don't feel we're experts in a particular area, then we will be looking to work with those people who are. So see what happens.
Well, just I think to round it up, there's a comment from Claire Hayward who says, Kath and John's knowledge and experience is brilliant, and their feedback on our work was so helpful. It really assisted me in starting my writing journey. So there's a nice note to end on.
Claire.
Thank you,
so
Claire.
Thank you so much, both of you. And thank you, everybody who's been watching live, and indeed those of you who are catching up on replay. And if you do put any kind of questions in the comments afterwards, John and Kath and I can come back and have a look at those and respond to them later. So I will be sending out a newsletter around this topic, and I will put a link in there to John and Kath's website as well, and also to the recording of this. So thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.